Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. The first time I put on that dress, I didn't feel like I was becoming someone else. I felt like I was coming home. I'm Riley, 18, living with my health nut mother, in a suffocating cycle of green smoothies and midnight secrets. This is the story of how I finally learned to look in the mirror without squeezing my eyes shut. Daytime in my house was a loud, chaotic blur of forced wellness. The moment the sun peeked over our quiet suburban street, the violent, mechanical whir of my mother's industrial blender would rattle the kitchen counters. "Riley, come get your kale and spirulina." Diana's voice would echo down the narrow hallway, always entirely too cheerful for 7 in the morning. Ever since my dad packed his bags and vanished a few years ago, my mom had thrown herself into a whirlwind of yoga retreats, herbal cleanses, and positive affirmations. I dragged myself out of bed, shivering despite the summer heat, and start putting on my armor. That's really what it felt like, armor. I'd pull on a pair of rough, heavy gray joggers. The thick cotton blend felt like sandpaper against my legs, deliberately chosen to hide how slender they were. Next came the white t-shirt, at least 2 sizes too big, the fabric swallowing my narrow shoulders and flat chest. Finally, the leather belt. I'd pull it tight, cinching the baggy fabric around my waist until it pinched. It was a bulky, cumbersome uniform, an invisible shield meant to block out the world, and more importantly, block out my own reflection. With my shoulder-length brown hair hanging in my face, I was a ghost haunting my own life. I was naturally androgynous, lacking the sharp jawline or broad chest the other guys at school paraded around. I was small, fragile in a way that made me feel incredibly out of place in my own skin, especially when wrapped in all that coarse, boyish fabric. "You really need a haircut, young man," Diana would say over the breakfast table, pushing a mason jar of green sludge toward me. "It's getting all in your eyes." "I like it long," I'd mumble, shrinking down into my oversized shirt. The word man always sat wrong in my ears. It felt like trying to force a puzzle piece into the wrong spot. It didn't fit. It hurt just a little bit every single time. I'd spend the entire day surviving the heavy clothes, surviving the expectations, surviving the feeling that there was a massive, crushing weight sitting squarely on my chest. I existed simply to avoid drawing attention to myself. But the night was an entirely different world. It was almost 1 a.m. I lay perfectly still in my bed, straining my ears. Through the thin drywall that separated my room from the hallway, I could hear the slow rhythmic sound of Diana's breathing. She was out cold, no doubt exhausted from an evening of intensive meditation, and whatever organic tea she'd brewed before bed. The house was dead silent. My chest felt tight, my heart knocking frantically against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. Why did I feel so terrified? I wasn't sneaking out to rob a bank or graffiti a wall. I was just walking down the hallway, but every time I made this trip, it felt like I was crossing a massive, terrifying chasm. I quietly pushed my blankets aside. The cool night air hit my skin, bringing out a flurry of goosebumps. I tiptoed out of my room, holding my breath as the floorboards creaked under my bare feet. "Oh, sweet mercy, please don't wake up," I prayed silently, freezing like a deer in headlights at every tiny squeak of the house settling. I slipped past the bathroom and gently pushed open the door to Diana's bedroom. The air in here always smelled faintly of lavender and vanilla, a soft, welcoming scent that immediately made my shoulders drop an inch. The moonlight spilled through the blinds, casting long, silvery stripes across her plush carpet. And there it was, the closet. It stood in the corner of the room, the doors slightly ajar, practically glowing in the dim light. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly desert dry. I stepped closer, my fingers trembling slightly. As I reached out and pulled the closet door fully open, Diana had a beautiful wardrobe. It was a treasure trove of textures and colors, a stark, painful contrast to the drawer full of scratchy gray and navy blue boxes I was forced to live out of. I didn't want to mess up her things, so my movements were painfully slow, reverent almost. I reached my hand out into the darkness of the closet. The back of my hand brushed against a hanging garment, and a jolt of electricity shot straight up my arm. It was a moss green silk dress. I carefully pulled the hanger out just enough to look at it in the moonlight. It was stunning, an elegant one-shoulder design. With fabric so light and fluid it looked like liquid emeralds. I rubbed the silk gently between my thumb and index finger. It was impossibly cool, impossibly soft. It didn't fight against my skin like my stiff jeans or rough joggers. It yielded to it. Gosh, what was I doing? I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the wooden doorframe of the closet. Was I completely losing my mind? My heart wasn't just hammering anymore. It was doing gymnastics. I carefully slid the green dress back into place and looked down at the dresser drawers built into the bottom of the closet. I knew what was in them. I'd looked before. I knelt on the carpet, the scratchy fabric of my own sweatpants irritating my knees, and pulled the second drawer open. It was full of nightgowns. Sitting right on top was a pink ditzy floral nightgown made of the softest cotton. It had tiny, delicate spaghetti straps and a gentle ruffled trim along the bottom edge. I picked it up, pressing the fabric to my cheek. It smelled like fabric softener and something incredibly safe. I carefully folded it and set it on the floor. Allowing myself to open the top drawer, my breath hitched. Neatly arranged in little dividers was her lingerie. There were delicate camisoles and matching sets of things I didn't even fully know the names of. I reached out and traced the edge of a light beige lace bralette. The lace was incredibly sheer, featuring a complex pattern of tiny woven flowers. It looked so fragile, so thin, as if a strong breeze could tear it apart. Yet it was beautiful. It was designed to highlight a body, to celebrate it, not to hide it beneath layers of heavy, unyielding cotton. Why do I feel like this? This wasn't some teenage prank. I didn't want to put these clothes on to mock anyone. And it wasn't driven by some weird, misplaced curiosity. It was a hollow, aching feeling in my gut, a hunger. I looked down at myself. I was wearing an old, faded graphic tee and a pair of dark flannel pajama pants. I looked like a boy. I was a boy. At least, that's what my birth certificate and my mother and the entire world told me every single day. But kneeling here in the moonlight, surrounded by silk, lace, and ruffles, the boy clothes felt like a prison uniform. I felt the familiar, crushing weight of my own life pressing down on me. I touched the pink floral nightgown again. I wanted to know what it felt like on my shoulders. I wanted to know if the soft cotton would make me feel lighter. I wanted to know if the ruffled hem would brush against my thighs and make me feel pretty. The word echoed in my head, loud and terrifying. Pretty boys weren't pretty. Boys were handsome, or tough, or athletic. But I didn't want to be any of those things. I just wanted to be soft. I stood up slowly, clutching the pink nightgown in my trembling hands. I looked toward the large vanity mirror in the corner of my mother's room. Even in the dark, I could see my silhouette. The oversized clothes hid everything. I was just a shape, a blob of masculine expectations. I walked over to the mirror, my bare feet silent on the carpet. I held the pink floral nightgown up against my chest, covering my t-shirt. My reflection stared back at me, with my long brown hair framing my face, and the soft pink fabric cascading down my torso. Something inside my brain simply clicked. It was like a camera lens finally coming into focus. For a fleeting second, the ghost in the mirror vanished, replaced by someone real. Someone I recognized, even though I had never met her before. A lump formed in my throat, thick and hot. I bit my lower lip to keep from letting out a sob. It was just a piece of fabric. Why was it making me want to cry? Why did it feel like I had been holding my breath for 18 years? And holding this dress against my chest was the first gasp of real oxygen I'd ever taken. I stood before the closet, realizing that this was no longer just a wooden door hiding my mother's clothes. It was a threshold. I had been standing on the edge of it for so long, too terrified to take a step, letting the heavy armor of my daytime life drag me down into the mud. Holy cow, Riley, I whispered to my reflection, my voice cracking slightly. What are you doing to yourself? I couldn't put the nightgown on. Not yet. The fear was still too loud, screaming in my ears that if I actually slipped those delicate straps over my shoulders, there would be no going back. The boy in the oversized gray joggers would be gone forever. Reluctantly, painfully, I lowered the pink nightgown. I folded it back up, smoothing out every wrinkle with shaking hands, and placed it exactly where I had found it. I closed the drawers. I nudged the closet doors back to their original position. As I sneaked back down the hallway to my own room, my chest felt emptier than ever. I climbed back into my bed, the sheets feeling cold and harsh against my skin. I stared at the ceiling for hours, the phantom sensation of silk and lace burning on my fingertips. I knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that the armor was cracking. And I knew that tomorrow night, holding the dress up to the mirror wouldn't be enough. The entire next day was a waking nightmare of sensory overload. I couldn't stop thinking about the closet. Every single thing I wore felt like a physical punishment. The stiff denim of my jeans dug into my waist, the coarse seams scratching against my hips. My heavy cotton t-shirt felt like a lead apron, pulling down on my shoulders, rough and unyielding. I sat at the kitchen table, pushing a bowl of overnight oats around with my spoon, while Diana prattled on about the benefits of mindful breathing. I nodded along, but internally, I was vibrating with anticipation. I was counting the minutes until the sun went down. I needed the house to go to sleep. I needed to open that door again. Oh my goodness, when will this day just end? I thought, practically squirming in my seat, as the heavy fabric of my boy clothes rubbed uncomfortably against my skin. By midnight, the house had finally surrendered to the dark. I waited an extra 30 minutes just to be absolutely certain. Diana was in her deepest cycle of sleep, when the only sound left was the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I made my move. I didn't just walk to her bedroom this time. I glided, propelled by a nervous magnetic pull in my chest. I closed her bedroom door softly behind me and stood in the dark. The moonlight painted the room in silver and shadows. I took a deep, shaky breath, filling my lungs with the scent of vanilla and lavender, and opened the closet doors. It was time to take off the armor. I unbuckled my thick leather belt. The sharp clack of the metal buckle sounded deafening, but I didn't care. I pulled it free and let it drop. Thud. It hit the carpet, a dead, useless thing. I shoved my rough pajama pants down and kicked them away into the corner as if they were covered in poison. Next went the baggy, shapeless t-shirt pulled over my head and tossed aside. Standing there in nothing but my boxers, the cool night air washed over my bare skin. I shivered, wrapping my arms around my narrow ribs. I knelt by the dresser and slowly opened the top drawer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pinch the fabric, but I managed to pull out the set of light beige lace lingerie I had admired the night before. My heart was doing a frantic tap dance against my sternum. Holy smokes, I'm actually doing this. I stepped out of my heavy cotton boxers, kicking them away to join the rest of my discarded disguise. Slowly, holding my breath, I stepped into the lace panties and pulled them up. The sensation was immediate and shocking. They weighed absolutely nothing. Instead of the bunching, thick, restrictive cotton I was used to, the sheer, delicate lace stretched and contoured perfectly to my hips. It was so impossibly soft, wrapping around me like a whispered secret. Next was the bralette. I slipped the thin straps over my shoulders and pulled the band down over my flat chest. The woven lace settled against my ribcage. It didn't hide my torso. It framed it. I looked down in the dim light. The scalloped edges of the lace rested against my skin, delicate and beautiful. The contrast was mind-bending. The heavy, unyielding daytime clothes were designed to erase me, to make me a generic, bulky shape. This lace was designed to touch, to hold, to celebrate the skin underneath. Every single pore on my body felt like it had suddenly woken up from a long, dreamless sleep. But I wasn't finished. I reached into the second drawer and lifted out the pink ditzy floral nightgown. I gathered the hem in my hands, raised my arms, and let the soft cotton cascade down over my head. The moment the spaghetti strap settled onto my collarbones, a tiny gasp escaped my lips. The fabric cascaded down my torso, cool and feather-light, before coming to rest with its ruffled hem gently grazing my mid-thighs. It didn't swallow my narrow frame. It draped over it elegantly. The gentle flare of the skirt hinted at hips I barely had, and the delicate neckline made my usually frail-looking neck and shoulders look intentionally graceful. I stood completely still, my eyes squeezed shut. I was afraid that if I moved, the spell would break. I was waiting for the guilt to hit me. I was waiting for that familiar voice in my head. The one that sounded like society, like disappointed relatives, like the boys at school, to scream at me, to tell me I was a freak, a joke, a boy playing a ridiculous game of dress-up. But the voice never came. Instead, there was just an overwhelming warm silence in my head, a profound sense of peace. I opened my eyes and looked down at my bare legs. The nightgown was beautiful, but my legs still looked stark and bare. I remembered seeing a small box in the back of the underwear drawer. I reached in and pulled it out, hosiery. I carefully unrolled a pair of black, sheer fishnet stockings. The top bands were made of wide, stretchy lace, lined with thin strips of silicone to hold them up. I sat on the edge of my mother's plush bed, my knees trembling, and gathered the nylon mesh of the right stocking into my thumbs. I slipped it over my toes and began to roll it up. The sensation of the woven fabric pulling taut over my skin was electric. It was slightly compressive, gently hugging my calf, gliding over my knee, and finally coming to rest high on my upper thigh, the silicone gripping my skin securely. I repeated the process with my left leg. I stood up and smoothed my hands down the sides of the nightgown, letting my palms brush against the lace tops of the stockings. Geez, Riley, I thought, my mind spinning, how does this feel so natural? I needed to see. The small mirror in the closet wasn't enough. I tiptoed out of the bedroom and slipped into the adjacent hallway bathroom, locking the door behind me with a soft click. I closed my eyes, reached for the wall switch, and turned on the dim vanity lights. 1, 2, 3. I opened my eyes. The person staring back at me in the glass wasn't the slouching, awkward boy who had choked down green smoothies that morning. In the warm yellow light of the bathroom, the pink floral fabric popped against my pale skin. The delicate spaghetti straps highlighted my slender shoulders, making them look feminine and dainty rather than weak and boyish. The ruffled hem flared out perfectly, and beneath it, my legs looked transformed. Encased in the sheer black diamond pattern of the fishnets, they looked impossibly long, soft, and undeniably pretty. My reflection wasn't a boy in a dress. It was a girl who had finally found her clothes. A massive, shuddering breath left my lungs. I hadn't realized how much tension I carried in my jaw, in my neck, in my spine, until this exact moment. The heavy invisible boulder that I had been carrying on my chest my entire life simply evaporated. I raised a trembling hand and touched my own reflection in the mirror, my fingertips tracing the outline of the girl in the glass. I didn't have words for this. It wasn't some cheap thrill. It wasn't a joke. It was absolute, undeniable relief. I smiled. It started as a tiny twitch at the corner of my mouth, and then blossomed into a wide, genuine, teary-eyed grin. I couldn't remember the last time I had smiled at my own reflection. I spun around slowly on the cool bathroom tiles, watching the pink ruffles of the nightgown flare out and swish against the black fishnets. I watched the way the lace bralette peeked through the slightly draped neckline. I felt beautiful. I felt light. I felt right. Thump! A sudden dull noise echoed from the hallway. My blood turned to absolute ice. The euphoric bubble popped violently. Diana, panic, hot and blinding, surged through my veins. Holy cow, if she catches me like this, I am dead. I am literally, actually dead. I scrambled. My heart hammered so hard against my ribs I thought it might shatter them. I practically tore the fishnets off my legs, my clumsy fingers struggling against the silicone bands. I threw the pink nightgown over my head, nearly catching the straps on my ears, and scrambled out of the delicate lace underwear. I bundled the precious, beautiful feminine fabrics into a chaotic ball and stuffed them under my arm. Unlocking the bathroom door and sprinting back into her bedroom, I shoved the clothes haphazardly back into the drawers. I'd have to organize them properly tomorrow night. Grabbed my heavy, depressing boy clothes off the floor and bolted down the hallway. I dove into my own bed just as I heard the toilet flush in Diana's bathroom down the hall. I pulled my scratchy, thick duvet up to my chin, squeezing my eyes shut, pretending to be fast asleep. I heard her footsteps pad down the hall, pause outside my door for a terrifying 3 seconds, and then retreat back to her room. The house went silent again. I lay there in the dark, my chest heaving, dripping with cold sweat. I was back in my oversized, uncomfortable pajamas, the armor was back on. But the damage was done, or rather, the healing had begun. Underneath the heavy cotton, my skin still felt the phantom caress of the silk and lace. My thighs remembered the gentle, secure hug of the fishnets. My shoulders remembered the delicate weight of the spaghetti straps. I touched my chest in the dark. The fear of getting caught had been horrifying. Yes. But the euphoria of what I had seen in that mirror, that was intoxicating. I closed my eyes, and all I could see was her, the girl in the pink nightgown. I knew, as I finally drifted into a restless sleep, that the boy I had pretended to be was living on borrowed time. The aftermath of my near discovery wasn't fear. It was a profound, agonizing impatience. I had tasted water after a lifetime in the desert, and now my throat was parched every waking second. 2 days later, Diana returned from a weekend holistic wellness retreat in Sedona. She burst through the front door smelling of sage and patchouli, her arms laden with canvas tote bags full of jars, tinctures, and aggressively green powders. "Riley family meeting at the kitchen island," she called out, clapping her hands together. I dragged myself out of my room, drowning in my usual baggy sweatshirt and stiff jeans, bracing myself for the latest health fad. Diana unpacked 3 large amber glass bottles onto the marble counter. They were labeled with rustic, minimalist fonts: wild yam extract, soy isoflavone complex, and women's ultimate glandular balance. I stared at the bottles, blinking slowly. "Mom, those say women's." Diana waved her hand dismissively, already unscrewing the caps. "Oh, hush, it's just marketing. My naturopath, Serenity, says these are vital for anyone suffering from urban cortisol overload. It's packed with natural phytoestrogens. It calms the nervous system, clears up teenage acne, and balances aggressive hormones. It's exactly what you need to stop moping around the house like a thundercloud. 2 pills from each, every morning." She slid a handful of capsules and a glass of filtered water across the island. I stared down at the pills, phytoestrogens, balances aggressive hormones. My heart gave a sudden violent kick against my ribs. I knew enough from my late-night internet deep dives to know what high doses of these specific herbal extracts could do to a male body. Diana thought she was treating my teenage angst. She had no idea she was handing me the key to the very lock I'd been rattling in the dark. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't complain. I didn't argue. I scooped up the pills and swallowed them down with a single gulp of water. From that morning on, taking those supplements became my most sacred, silent ritual. I wasn't just swallowing herbs, I was planting seeds. And I waited, with bated breath, for them to bloom. The changes didn't happen overnight, but when they started, they were undeniable. By the end of the 2nd week, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror washing my face, and I froze. My hands slicked over my cheeks, but the friction was gone. The rough, slightly oily texture of my teenage skin had vanished. I rinsed away the cleanser and leaned closer to the glass. My pores looked microscopic. My skin was incredibly soft, possessing a luminous, almost porcelain quality I'd never seen before. There was a permanent, natural dusting of pink across my cheekbones, making my face look softer, rounder, and far more delicate. The sharp, boyish angles of my jawline seemed to be melting away like wax near a flame. "Oh, my stars," I thought, pressing my fingertips into my own cheeks. "It's actually working." But it was during the 4th week that the physical reality of what was happening truly hit me, quite literally, right in the chest. I was getting dressed for the day, pulling my heavy, abrasive white cotton t-shirt over my head. As the fabric dropped and dragged across my chest, a sudden, sharp zing of sensitivity made me gasp and grab the edge of the dresser. "Goodness gracious," I hissed, rubbing a hand gently over my sternum. Beneath the flat expanse of my chest, directly behind my nipples, I could feel small, firm, tender lumps forming. Breast buds, the medical term, floated through my mind, followed by a rush of euphoria so intense my knees went weak. The skin there had become incredibly sensitive, tingling and aching whenever the rough fabric of my boy clothes rubbed against it. My body was changing. The flat, masculine chest I was supposed to develop was yielding, making way for a subtle, beautiful swelling. Every time I moved, every time my shirt shifted, The slight twinge of tenderness was a constant, glorious reminder. I am changing. I am becoming her. Even my stiff jeans were beginning to betray the illusion. When I buttoned them, the waist felt a little looser, while the fabric across my hips and upper thighs felt suspiciously tighter. My center of gravity was shifting. My body was redistributing its shape, cooperating with my deepest desires in a way that felt nothing short of miraculous. By week 6, it wasn't just my body that had softened, it was my mind. The heavy, suffocating fog of male stoicism I had forced myself to carry had evaporated. I found myself tearing up while listening to a bittersweet pop song on the radio. I cried over a perfectly lit sunset. I laughed with a higher, melodic cadence that felt so incredibly natural slipping past my lips. My emotions were no longer buried under layers of coarse fabric. They were right at the surface, fragile, beautiful, and alive. That Friday night, Diana went to an overnight sound bath retreat. I had the entire house to myself until the next afternoon. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I practically sprinted to her bedroom. I didn't have to hide in the dark this time. I turned on all the soft vanity lights, illuminating the closet in a warm, inviting glow. I discarded my boy clothes without a second thought, tossing the painful jeans and heavy shirt into a forgotten pile on the floor. I opened the lingerie drawer and pulled out a matching set in pale cream. As I hooked the bralette around my back and let the soft cup settle over my chest, the relief was immediate. The soft lace protected my tender, sensitive buds, gently supporting the subtle new curves taking shape there. Then, I reached for the hanger holding the moss green silk dress. My hands trembled as I slipped it off the rack. I had dreamed about this piece of fabric since that very first night. I stepped into it, pulling the emerald material up my body. It felt like stepping into a pool of cool water. I slid my left arm through the single shoulder strap, reaching behind my back to slowly pull up the delicate, hidden zipper. Zip the silk cinch gently at my waist and drape beautifully over my hips. I walked over to the full-length mirror, my bare feet silent on the carpet. I closed my eyes, took a deep, shaky breath, and opened them. My hands flew to my mouth to stifle a sob. The dress didn't just hang on me like it would have a month and a half ago. It fit. The single strap rested perfectly across a collarbone that looked impossibly dainty. The bodice of the dress hugged the new, subtle fullness of my chest, the silk catching the light and hinting at the curves blooming underneath. The fabric cascaded down, pooling around my feet, swishing softly against my calves with every microscopic movement. But it was my face that completely undid me. Framed by my long brown hair, which I had brushed until it shone, was a girl. Her skin was soft and glowing. Her eyes were wide, luminous, and filled with a raw, unprotected vulnerability. The jawline was smooth, the lips a natural, flushed pink. I wasn't a boy playing a dangerous game in his mother's closet. The boy was gone. He had simply melted away, leaving this delicate, beautiful creature in his wake. "Riley," I whispered to the glass. Even my voice sounded softer, lacking its usual gravelly forced pitch. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and heavy, before spilling over my lashes and tracing wet paths down my flushed cheeks. I didn't try to wipe them away. I let them fall. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I wasn't crying out of shame or guilt. I was crying because of the sheer overwhelming magnitude of the relief. It felt like returning to a childhood home you thought had burned down, only to find the door unlocked and the hearth warm. I stood in front of the mirror, wrapping my arms around my waist, hugging the cool silk against my own skin. The internal war that had raged inside my head for 18 years finally went completely, beautifully silent. My body wasn't an enemy to be hidden beneath armor anymore. It was mine. It was finally, truly mine. And for the rest of that night, as I twirled in the green silk and watched the fabric dance around my ankles, I promised the girl in the mirror that I would never, ever lock her away in the dark again. The safety of the nighttime closet was glorious, but it wasn't enough anymore. The girl in the green silk dress couldn't just vanish when the sun came up. She was clawing at the inside of my ribcage, begging to breathe the daytime air. My opportunity came 3 days later. "Get your shoes on. Riley, we're going to the farmer's market and then hitting the organic supermarket." Diana shouted up the stairs on a bright Tuesday morning. We need to restock on chia seeds and kombucha. I stood in my room, staring at my open dresser drawers. The pile of baggy t-shirts and stiff jeans looked like a pile of dead leaves. I couldn't do it. My chest was too tender, my skin too soft, my hips too sensitive for that armor today. I took a deep breath, marched into Diana's room, and opened her closet. I wasn't going to steal her clothes, just borrow the aesthetic. I found a pair of light wash, high-waisted mom jeans that I knew she hadn't worn in years. Then, from my own forgotten summer pile, I dug out a tight, ribbed white tank top. It was meant to be an undershirt, but I grabbed a pair of fabric scissors and quickly, nervously, cropped the bottom hem off so it stopped just above my belly button. I dressed quickly before my courage could evaporate. I pulled the high-waisted jeans up. They hugged my waist perfectly, the soft denim conforming to the new, subtle curve of my hips without the painful restriction of my old pants. Underneath, I was wearing a soft pink wire-free bralette I had ordered online with a gift card, secretly shipped to an Amazon locker. The ribbed crop top went on next, fitting snugly against my chest, the cropped hem leaving an inch of my pale midriff exposed. I looked in my small bedroom mirror. I wasn't wearing a dress or lace tights, but this outfit was undeniably, aggressively androgynous, leaning heavily into the feminine. I pulled my long brown hair up, twisting it into a messy, high ponytail, pulling a few face-framing strands loose to soften my jawline even further. I applied a tiny dab of tinted lip balm and pinched my cheeks to bring out the color. "You can do this," I whispered to the reflection, though my hands were trembling so badly I had to clench them into fists. When I walked downstairs, Diana glanced up from her tote bags. She paused, her eyes raking over my high-waisted jeans and the cropped shirt. I braced myself for the lecture, my heart doing flip-flops against my ribs. "Well," she said, raising an eyebrow, "that's certainly a more fitted look than your usual potato sacks. The high waist is very trendy. Are those my old Levi's?" "Yeah," I mumbled, my voice cracking slightly. "I hope that's okay. My old jeans. They don't fit right anymore." "Keep them. They look better on you anyway," she said breezily, entirely oblivious to the monumental internal crisis I was surviving. "Come on, let's go." The farmer's market was a blur of anxiety. Every time a stranger walked past, my shoulders tensed, waiting for a confused stare or a pointed laugh. But nothing happened. People bumped into me, apologized, and kept walking. My heart rate slowly returned to a somewhat normal rhythm. Then, we went to the organic supermarket. Diana was deeply engrossed in a debate with the butcher about grass-fed versus pasture-raised chicken, leaving me to handle the cart at the checkout lane. I stood by the conveyor belt, awkwardly shifting my weight, hyper-aware of the sliver of exposed skin at my waist. The cashier scanning our items was a guy, maybe 20 or 21, wearing a green apron and a name tag that read Marcus. He had warm, laughing eyes and messy blonde hair. "Did you find everything okay today?" Marcus asked, scanning a jar of artisanal honey. "Yes, thank you," I replied, forcing myself to look up. I tried to keep my voice neutral, but my nerves pushed it into a slightly higher, softer register. Marcus looked up from the scanner, his eyes meeting mine. He paused, a jar of peanut butter suspended in midair. He didn't look at me with confusion or judgment. His gaze lingered for a second on my high ponytail, then dropped to my face. He offered a bright, easy, incredibly genuine smile. "I just wanted to say, your hair looks really pretty like that," Marcus said casually, throwing the peanut butter into a brown paper bag. "It really suits you." The entire supermarket seemed to go dead silent. The beeping of the register, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the chatter of the other customers, it all vanished. Pretty. He had called me pretty. And not in a sarcastic, mocking way. He said it the way a guy compliments a girl. He had looked at me, the high-waisted jeans, the cropped shirt, the soft face, the ponytail, and his brain had instantly categorized me as female. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. "Oh," I breathed, my face flushing so violently I felt like I was radiating heat. "Thank you. That's really sweet." My voice was breathless, completely devoid of the forced masculine gravel I usually employed. It sounded like me. Marcus beamed, handing me the receipt. "Have a great day." I took the slip of paper with trembling fingers. I couldn't speak. I simply nodded and pushed the car toward the exit, my knees feeling like they were made of absolute jelly. When Diana caught up with me in the parking lot, I was leaning against the side of the car, staring down at my hands. My heart was soaring. It felt like I had just jumped out of an airplane and miraculously sprouted wings. I had passed. Out in the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the real world, someone had looked at me and seen a girl. Diana unlocked the car, tossing her bags into the back seat. As I climbed into the passenger side, she paused before starting the engine. She turned her head, looking at me intently. Her gaze was heavy, searching. She looked at my flushed cheeks, the way my hands were nervously gripping the hem of my cropped shirt, the loose strands of hair framing my face. The silence in the car stretched on, thick and pregnant with 1,000 unspoken questions. I froze, the euphoria instantly draining out of my shoes. She knows, my panicked brain screamed. She saw Marcus, she heard him, she knows. Diana stared at me for 5 agonizing seconds. Then she let out a slow, quiet breath, turned back to the steering wheel, and started the ignition. She didn't say a single word for the entire drive home. But as I sat there, watching the suburban streets blur past the window, the fear didn't completely take over. Underneath the anxiety of my mother's heavy silence, a tiny invincible flame had been lit. Marcus had seen me, and for the very first time in my life, I felt real. The tension in our small house following the grocery store incident was thick enough to slice with a butter knife. For 2 days, Diana and I danced around each other in a quiet, agonizing ballet of unasked questions. She didn't mention the high-waisted jeans. She didn't mention my cropped shirt. And she certainly didn't mention Marcus calling me pretty. But every time I looked up from my dinner plate or walked past her in the hallway, I could feel the weight of her gaze resting on my shoulders. I was terrified. But ironically, I couldn't bring myself to put the baggy gray joggers back on. I stuck to the most fitted, neutral clothes I could find in my drawer. The heavy armor of my boyhood was officially retired, crumpled in a corner of my closet like the shed skin of a snake. Then, on a stiflingly humid Friday evening, the atmosphere broke. "I'm going to a vision board manifesting circle at Serenity's house," Diana announced, grabbing her keys from the entryway bowl. She was wearing a flowing bohemian wrap and a clinking array of crystal necklaces. "I won't be back until very late. Probably after midnight. There's leftover quinoa salad in the fridge." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was already starting a frantic, joyous drum roll against my tender chest. "Have fun." The front door clicked shut, the deadbolt engaged. I stood in the entryway for a full 60 seconds, just listening to the sound of her car starting and backing out of the driveway. As the hum of the engine faded down the suburban street, a profound, vibrating silence descended over the house. I had the entire night, no tiptoeing, no panic listening for floorboard creaks. Tonight, I wasn't just going to hold a dress up in the dark. Tonight, I was going to see the whole picture. I started in the shower. I turned the water on as hot as I could stand, letting the steam fill the small upstairs bathroom until the mirror clouded over completely. As I stood under the spray, washing my hair, I took a long, honest inventory of my changing body. The supplements, the massive doses of phytoestrogens and herbal extracts I was taking every morning, were doing their quiet, miraculous work. As I ran the soapy loofah over my arms and torso, the skin felt completely foreign, yet entirely right. It was slick, soft, and devoid of that rough, porous texture I had grown up with. When I passed the sponge over my chest, I let out a sharp intake of breath. The breast buds were undeniably there now, distinct and incredibly sensitive, causing a dull, aching throb to echo through my chest. My waist felt drawn in, my hips slightly softer. The boy I used to be was washing down the drain with the suds. I stepped out, wrapping a plush towel tightly around my chest rather than my waist. A small but profoundly validating shift in habit. I dried off completely and walked down the hall to Diana's bedroom. This time, my movements weren't frantic or panicked. They were deliberate, ceremonial. I opened the lingerie drawer and pulled out the baby pink lace set. It was beautiful, adorned with tiny, intricate floral patterns woven directly into the sheer mesh. I slipped the panties on first. The delicate fabric stretched seamlessly over my hips, the scalloped edges resting softly against my skin. There was no bulky, bunching cotton, only a second skin of absolute femininity. Then came the bralette. I slid my arms through the soft elastic straps and reached around to secure the hooks at my back. Click. As I adjusted the front, my breath hitched in my throat. 2 weeks ago, this piece of lace had rested flat and empty against my ribcage. Today, it was entirely different. The soft fabric gently cupped the tender, newly formed swelling of my chest. It wasn't empty anymore. It was providing actual gentle support to my developing curves. A shiver of pure, unadulterated euphoria ran down my spine. The sensation of being filled out, even just a little bit, grounded me in my femininity in a way that made my knees genuinely weak. Next came the hosiery. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the pair of black, sheer stay-up stockings with the wide lace tops. I gathered the whisper-thin nylon into my thumbs, placed it over my toes, and began the slow, exquisite process of unrolling them up my legs. The sheer mesh glided over my freshly smooth calves, over my knees, and stretched taut against my thighs. The silicone backing gripped my skin firmly. I stood up, smoothing my hands down my thighs, marveling at the contrast between the dark, geometric diamond pattern of the fishnets and my pale, soft skin underneath. My legs looked endless. They looked elegant. Finally, I approached the closet and pulled out the moss green silk dress. I unzipped the hidden closure on the side and stepped into the pool of liquid emerald fabric. I pulled it up, sliding my left arm through the single shoulder strap. The silk was wonderfully cool against my feverish skin. I reached under my arm, pinched the zipper, and pulled it up to my armpit. The dress cinched beautifully at my waist, falling in a breathtaking sweep of fabric down to my ankles. It draped over my new, subtle curves as if it had been tailored specifically for me. But I wasn't finished. Tonight, I needed the complete picture. I sat down at Diana's large vanity mirror and turned on the bright, Hollywood-style bulbs outlining the glass. I stared at my face. It was soft, yes, but it was a blank canvas. My hands were shaking violently as I opened her makeup bag. I had watched dozens of online tutorials under the safety of my bed covers, but I had never dared to try it myself. I started with a peach-tone blush. I took a fluffy brush, dipped it into the powder, tapped off the excess just like the girls in the videos did, and swept it gently upward along my cheekbones. Instantly, my face came alive. The color highlighted the new rounded softness of my cheeks, giving me a healthy, radiant glow. Next was the mascara. Oh heavens, don't poke your eye out. I prayed silently, my hand trembling as I unscrewed the black wand. I tilted my head back slightly, looking down into the mirror, and carefully brushed the wand through my eyelashes. 1 coat, 2 coats, my eyelashes, already naturally dark, suddenly fanned out beautifully, making my eyes look twice as large and impossibly dough-like. Finally, the lips, I found a soft rose-tinted lip gloss. I carefully applied it, the glossy sheen reflecting the vanity lights, making my lips look full and delicate. I set the tube down. I reached up and pulled the hair tie out of my messy bun. My long brown hair tumbled down over my bare shoulders. I brushed it out until it fell in soft, shiny waves, parting it slightly off-center so it framed my face perfectly, partially sweeping over the bare shoulder left exposed by the dress. I put the hairbrush down. I placed my hands flat on the vanity table. I slowly raised my eyes to meet my reflection. The world stopped spinning. The air in the room completely stilled. There she was, not a shadow, not a quick glimpse in a dimly lit bathroom. She was fully realized, bathed in bright, undeniable light. A girl in a moss green silk dress, with thick, dark lashes, rosy cheeks, and glossy lips. Her bare shoulder was delicate and vulnerable, her chest pressed softly against the bodice of the dress. The black lace of the stockings peeked through the slit of the silk when she shifted her weight. There was no trace of the boy in the baggy sweatpants. He was utterly eradicated. In his place was a creature of such profound beauty and grace that my chest literally ached from looking at her. I touched my own cheek, feeling the soft powder, and the reflection touched hers back. This was me, This was the soul that had been crying out from the darkness for 18 years. The reflection in the mirror wasn't an illusion. The oversized boy clothes had been the illusion. This was the absolute brilliant truth. I stood up from the vanity, the silk rustling softly around my legs. I did a slow, giddy twirl in the center of the bedroom, laughing out loud as the fabric flared around me. I felt like I was floating. The sheer, overwhelming happiness of feeling completely aligned in my own skin was intoxicating. Clack! The sound of the front door deadbolt echoing up the staircase hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. My joyful laugh died in my throat, replaced by a suffocating gasp of horror. Diana, she was home early. Oh my stars, no, 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 no. Panic, colder and sharper than ice, flooded my veins. My mind went entirely blank. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The flight instinct screamed at me to run. But where? I was in her bedroom. The staircase was right outside the door. I heard the dull thud of her purse dropping onto the entryway table. I heard the unmistakable sound of her clinking crystal necklaces as she kicked off her sandals. "Riley, you still awake?" her voice called out, floating up the stairs. I was paralyzed in the center of the room. I looked down at myself. I was wearing her lingerie. I was wearing her silk dress. I had makeup painted onto my face. There was absolutely no hiding this. There was no excuse I could invent. If I tried to take the dress off, I'd just be standing there in a pink lace bra and black fishnets. The heavy, rhythmic footsteps began to ascend the wooden stairs. Each step sounded like the ticking of a bomb. Thump, thump, thump. I forgot my amethyst geode for the manifesting circle. She muttered to herself as she reached the upstairs landing. I stood frozen under the bright vanity lights. I wrapped my arms around myself, digging my manicured fingernails into my bare shoulders. Shaking so violently the silk dress shivered around me. I squeezed my eyes tightly shut, waiting for the sky to fall. The bedroom door, already pushed slightly ajar, swung wide open. The footsteps stopped dead. I couldn't open my eyes. I simply couldn't do it. I stood there, trembling, holding my breath, waiting for the scream. I waited for the look of disgust, the anger, the horrified realization that her son was standing in her bedroom wearing her finest evening wear and a face full of cosmetics. The silence stretched for 3 entire seconds. It was the loudest, most agonizing silence of my entire life. I could hear my heart beating so loudly I thought my eardrums might burst. "Riley," a voice whispered. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a shout of anger. It was a breathless, shattered exhale. I slowly, terrifyingly, opened my eyes. Diana stood in the doorway. Her hand was covering her mouth. Her eyes, wide and shining, were tracing every inch of my body. From the green silk draping over my developing curves, to my long hair resting against my bare collarbone, down to the black lace stockings hugging my thighs, and finally back up to my mascara-lined, tear-filled eyes. We locked eyes. The boy she had raised and the girl I truly was, standing exposed in the blinding light, waiting for the verdict of my existence. The silence stretched so tight I thought it might actually snap and shatter the vanity mirror. I was completely paralyzed. The brilliant Hollywood lights framing the mirror suddenly felt like harsh police interrogators. The moss-green silk, which just seconds ago had felt like liquid heaven, now clung to my trembling skin like a neon sign flashing my deepest, darkest secret. My lungs forgot how to process oxygen. I just stared at my mother, waiting for the scream, the disgust, the inevitable command to take off her dress and scrub the makeup from my face. But Diana didn't scream. She didn't move to shield her eyes. Instead, a single tear slipped down her cheek, cutting a shiny path through her own makeup. Her hand, the one covering her mouth, trembled violently. The heavy beaded amethyst necklace she was wearing clicked softly against her chest as her breathing hitched. She took a slow, hesitant step forward, then another. I shrank back against the vanity, my hands instinctively crossing over my chest, over the lace bralette and the subtle new curves pushing against the silk. "Oh my goodness, please don't hate me. Please, please don't hate me." My mind chanted in a frantic, terrifying loop. Diana stopped less than a foot away. She reached out. I flinched, closing my eyes tightly, bracing myself. But her fingers didn't snatch at the silk. They didn't slap my face. They gently, incredibly softly, brushed a stray lock of my long brown hair behind my ear. Her thumb lingered against my jawline, tracing the impossibly soft, feminized skin of my cheek. "Riley," she whispered, her voice thick and trembling. She swallowed hard, tears now freely cascading down her face. "Riley, my daughter, you are so beautiful." The world stopped. My brain completely short-circuited. Daughter. The word hit me like a physical shockwave. It wasn't said with mockery. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of absolute, undeniable truth. "Ma," I choked out, my voice cracking entirely, losing the soft feminine pitch and devolving into a ragged, breathless sob. Diana's face crumbled into an expression of profound, agonizing relief and sorrow. Her knees buckled, she sank toward the floor, and I instantly dropped down with her. We ended up in a heap on the plush bedroom carpet, the emerald silk of the dress pooling around us like water, tangling with the hem of her bohemian wrap. She pulled me into a crushing embrace. I collapsed against her shoulder, my tears instantly ruining the careful mascara and peach blush I had just applied. I clung to her, my fingers digging into the fabric of her shirt. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't being hugged as a stiff, awkward boy. I was being held exactly as I was. The delicate strap of the dress slipped down my shoulder, but it didn't matter. The lace of my bralette pressed against my heaving chest as I sobbed uncontrollably, the sound ripping out of my throat ugly, loud and incredibly desperate. "I'm sorry," I gasped between sobs, burying my face in her neck. "I'm so sorry, I didn't want to be weird. I couldn't breathe in those clothes anymore." "Shh, sweet girl, stop apologizing. Good heavens, do not apologize," Diana cried, rocking me back and forth on the floor. She pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes, her hands gripping my bare, delicate shoulders. She looked at me, truly looked at the girl in the makeup, the silk, and the lace stockings, and offered a wet, heartbreaking smile. "Did you honestly think," she began, her voice shaking with a mixture of a laugh and a sob, "that those holistic supplements were just everyday herbs?" I blinked, the tears momentarily blurring my vision. My heart did a strange, confused flutter. "Well, what?" Diana let out a watery chuckle, wiping a streak of black mascara from my cheek with her thumb. "Riley, my sweet girl, I am a health fanatic, not a fool. I know perfectly well that a little bit of wild yam doesn't completely alter a person's bone structure and skin texture in 6 weeks. I knew exactly what was in those high-dose phytoestrogen and glandular pills." My mouth fell open slightly. My hand instinctively flew to my chest, my fingertips brushing the tender, sensitive swelling beneath the silk bodice, the softening of my skin, the widening of my hips, the emotional waves. You knew." "I've known for so long, honey," Diana said, her voice dropping to a fierce, protective whisper. "I saw the way you looked at the girls at the mall. Not the way teenage boys look at girls, but with this devastating, heartbreaking envy. I saw how miserable you were in those awful, baggy clothes. I noticed when my lingerie drawers were slightly rearranged. I saw the ghost of a person you were becoming." She gripped my hands tightly. "I wanted to help you. I wanted to tell you it was okay. But I was so terribly cowardly. I didn't know how to start the conversation without scaring you away. Or worse, pushing you back into the closet. So I went to Serenity and I specifically asked for the absolute highest, most potent herbal hormone balancers we could legally find. I thought if your body started to align with who you were inside, maybe you'd find the courage to show me." She pressed her forehead against mine, her tears dropping onto my collarbone. "I am so sorry I made you do this alone in the dark, Riley. I am so sorry I made you feel like you had to hide my own daughter from me." The magnitude of what she was saying crashed over me like a tidal wave. My body hadn't betrayed the masculine expectations by accident. My mother hadn't been blindly poisoning me with wellness fads. Every tender ache in my chest, every time I noticed my waist cinching in or my skin glowing, it was engineered. It was an act of profound, silent, desperate motherly love. She had been quietly building the foundation for the girl inside me to finally step out. "Mom," I wailed, the word carrying a weight it had never possessed before. The last remaining barricades inside my soul shattered into dust. 18 years of suffocating behind a heavy leather belt. 18 years of hiding my eyes from the mirror. 18 years of feeling like a grotesque mistake. It all poured out of me. We sat there on the floor of the closet for hours. The terror I had felt just moments before melted into an intense, euphoric relief. I cried until my eyes were swollen. And then I laughed. A bright, melodic sound that bubbled up from the bottom of my stomach. I told her everything. I told her about the scratchy gray joggers. I told her about how the pink floral nightgown made me feel like I could fly. I told her about the boy at the supermarket who called me pretty. And how my heart had practically leapt out of my throat. Diana listened to every word, her eyes shining with pride, gently stroking my long hair. She admired the green dress on me, told me the blush I used was the perfect shade for my complexion, and promised to teach me how to apply liquid eyeliner so I wouldn't have to tremble through it alone anymore. As the grandfather clock downstairs chimed 2 a.m, the agonizing splinter that had been lodged in my chest since I was a child was finally, completely pulled out. I wasn't a boy in a dress. I wasn't a secret meant for the midnight shadows. I was Riley. I was a girl. And for the first time in my entire existence, the person I loved most in the world was looking right at me. And she saw exactly the same thing. The next morning, I woke up feeling entirely unmoored, as if gravity had somehow lessened its grip on my bedroom. Sunlight was streaming through my blinds, casting warm, golden bars across my blanket. For the first time in my life, I didn't wake up with a knot of dread sitting heavy in my stomach. The colossal, exhausting secret was out. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. The moss-green silk dress was draped carefully over my desk chair, a beautiful, tangible reminder that last night hadn't been a fever dream. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded out into the hallway. There, sitting perfectly centered on the floor outside my door, was a large, flat, pristine white box wrapped in a pink silk ribbon. My breath caught. I knelt down, untied the ribbon with trembling fingers, and lifted the lid. Resting on a bed of crisp tissue paper was a brand new outfit. There was a delicate yellow sundress covered in a pattern of tiny white daisies, a pair of sheer nude pantyhose, and pristine white strappy sandals. Tucked into the corner of the box was a proper, lightly padded, wire-free bra in a soft cream color. Resting on top of it all was a small, handwritten note on Diana's stationery. From now on, there is absolutely no need to hide. Good morning, sunshine. Tears immediately pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. Clutching the box to my chest, I took the clothes back into my room, treating them with absolute reverence. I didn't reach for the drawer that held my boy clothes. I didn't even look at it. That part of my life was officially permanently closed. I started with the cream-colored bra. As I clasped it in the back and adjusted the straps, the sensation sent a cascade of pure, sparkling joy straight to my brain. It wasn't a bralette or a makeshift garment. It was a real, beautifully structured bra. The soft padding gently cradled the sensitive, blossoming buds on my chest, giving my silhouette a subtle but undeniable feminine curve. It felt so incredibly right, so natural, as if my body had been waiting its whole existence just for this. Next came the sheer nude tights. I unrolled them up my legs, feeling the incredibly fine mesh hug my calves and thighs, evening out my skin tone and making my legs look impossibly soft and sleek. Finally, I lifted the yellow sundress. It had thin, adjustable straps and a smocked bodice that cinched perfectly at my waist, before flowing out into a soft, breezy skirt that stopped just above my knees. As I slipped it over my head, the light cotton settled against my skin. I looked in the mirror. I looked like summer. I looked like a girl. A gentle knock at the door made me jump slightly. Diana peeked her head in. Her eyes widened, and a brilliant, watery smile spread across her face. "Oh, Riley," she breathed, stepping into the room. "You look absolutely precious." "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice automatically settling into its softer, higher, natural pitch. "For everything. For all of this. Come here," she said gently, patting the small vanity stool in the corner of my room. "Let's do your hair. No more messy buns to hide your face. We are going out today." My stomach did a spectacular, terrifying somersault, going out in the daylight in a yellow sundress. I sat on the stool, my hands tightly gripping the soft fabric of my skirt to hide my trembling. Diana stood behind me, gently brushing out my long brown hair. Her hands were incredibly soothing. She gathered the top half of my hair, expertly braiding it into a delicate crown, before letting the rest cascade down my back in loose waves. She added a touch of lip gloss and a single swipe of mascara. It wasn't a frantic, panicked rush in the middle of the night anymore. It was a shared ritual. It was mothers and daughters. "Ready?" she asked, resting her hands softly on my bare shoulders. "I think so," I whispered, though my heart was beating a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Stepping out the front door was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of my life. I had gone to the supermarket in jeans, but this was entirely different. There was no hiding in a dress. The warm summer breeze caught the hem of the yellow fabric, making it swirl gently around my knees. I could feel the sun warming my bare arms and shoulders. The click-clack of my new white sandals on the pavement felt terribly loud, announcing my presence to the entire neighborhood. I felt incredibly exposed, but as I slid into the passenger seat of Diana's car, I realized something vital. Without the heavy, coarse armor of my boy clothes weighing me down, I felt impossibly light. "We are going to that little artisan cafe downtown," Diana announced, pulling out of the driveway. "I need an iced matcha, and I think you deserve a treat." The cafe was packed. The bell above the door chimed loudly as we walked in, hit immediately by the rich aroma of roasted espresso beans and fresh pastries. I stood behind Diana in the queue, nervously shifting my weight from one foot to the other. I smoothed the skirt of my sundress down for the 20th time. Every time someone walked past us with their tray, I held my breath, terrified they would stop, point and expose the boy pretending to be a girl. But no one did. People just shuffled past, completely unbothered by the girl in the yellow dress. When we reached the counter, my heart leapt right into my throat. The barista at the register was a guy, maybe 22, wearing a fitted black t-shirt and a dark green apron. He had dark, messy curls and a surprisingly sweet, disarming smile. His name tag read Ethan. "Hi there," Ethan said cheerfully, looking at Diana. "What can I get for you?" Diana ordered her iced matcha, then turned to me with an encouraging nod. "And for you, sweetheart." I stepped up to the counter. The air conditioning suddenly felt freezing against my bare shoulders. Ethan shifted his gaze to me. His eyes briefly took in my braided hair, the floral dress, the shy, nervous way I was clutching my small purse. I started, but out of sheer panic, I cleared my throat. The nervous tick betrayed me. For a split second, my vocal cords tightened, and the next words that tumbled out dropped dangerously close to my old, masculine register. "I'll have a strawberry lemonade, please." The pitch was off. It was husky, lower than intended. Oh my stars, I froze instantly. The entire world ground to a devastating halt. Panic, hot and sickening, flooded my veins. I bit my lower lip so hard it ached. I wanted the floor tiles to crack open and swallow me whole. "He knows." My brain screamed in sheer terror. The voice ruined it. He heard a guy's voice. He's going to laugh. He's going to stare. I shrank back, instinctively raising my shoulders, bracing myself for the confusion or the mocking grin. I squeezed my eyes shut for a microsecond, the euphoria draining from my body. But the dreadful pause never came. Ethan didn't blink. He didn't stutter. The warm, incredibly kind smile on his face didn't falter for a single fraction of a second. He punched the order into the screen with a few quick taps, then looked right back up at me. His eyes were entirely bright and totally accepting. "One strawberry lemonade," Ethan said smoothly, picking up a clear plastic cup and grabbing a marker. He leaned against the counter slightly, offering me a brilliant, genuine wink. "For the lovely lady, coming right up. Have an absolutely gorgeous day, all right?" The breath left my lungs in a massive, shuddering whoosh. Lovely lady. He hadn't questioned it. He hadn't cared. He just saw a slightly nervous girl with a husky voice ordering a lemonade. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated euphoria so strong it made my fingertips tingle crash through me. It wasn't just a rush of relief. It was the ultimate, undeniable confirmation of my existence. I wasn't an imposter. I belonged here, in the daylight, in this dress. Thank you, I stammered, my voice floating right back up to its natural, melodic, feminine pitch. A massive, radiant smile broke across my face, so wide it made my cheeks hurt. Diana handed him her card, her eyes finding mine. She offered me a tiny, secretive, incredibly proud smile. We grabbed our drinks and walked back out into the bright sunshine. I held the cold, sweating plastic cup in my hands, feeling the warm breeze rustle my skirt. The fear was completely, wonderfully gone. I took a sip of the sweet lemonade, and for the first time, the world around me felt vibrant, colorful, and impossibly beautiful. That night, hours after the sun had set, the house was quiet again. I stood in my own bedroom, alone. I had washed my makeup off and brushed out my braids. I was wearing the pink ditzy floral nightgown with the ruffled hem, the very first garment that had awakened my soul all those weeks ago. I walked over to the full-length mirror I had finally unturned from the wall. I looked at my reflection. There was no internal conflict screaming in the back of my mind. There was no ghost in baggy gray joggers haunting the glass. There was no armor left to shed. There was just a girl. She had soft shoulders, a gentle smile, and a heart completely full of peace. I traced the ruffled hem of the nightgown with my fingers, letting out a soft, contented sigh. I turned off the lamp and climbed into my bed, pulling the covers up over my shoulders. My name is Riley, and finally, perfectly, my summer was just beginning.